Hello everyone, this is Fletch from Twilight Render. Today we will be talking about a new plugin for SketchUp called Cabwriter. Cabwriter is an advanced custom kitchen creation tool for SketchUp. We're going to show you how to take your kitchen created with Cabwriter and turn it into a full 3D rendering in SketchUp with Twilight Render. So here we have a custom kitchen designed in Cabwriter. I'm not going to teach you how to use Cabwriter. They have a wonderful channel. Please check out their in-depth tutorials. First thing, we want to decide a view that we're going to be looking at. And today we're going to be looking at probably two different views. The first of which is this view from this angle. So when you set up your view in SketchUp, use the little position camera tool here. And with that guy, you just simply click once and let go. If you click and drag, it will try to place the camera at that height. So just click once and let go, and that straightens your verticals out, which is very important in rendering interior images. You'll want and in any architectural images really, you'll want your verticals to be straight up and down. And this positions your camera so that it's perfectly horizontal. Then you can use the Shift key while you click and drag down, and that will move your eye level down. Shift key, click and drag up to move your eye level up. Holding the Alt key, you can walk backwards through walls or obstructions. And it's just a very handy tool to be in this little walk tool here. This is located in the large tool set. If you haven't opened that, definitely be using the large tool set. And once you have decided on your camera view, which I think this looks pretty good, we want to see a little bit of the living room here and a little bit more of this door here. So I'm going to use the magnification tool, this zoom tool, and I'm going to hold Shift down and click and drag down, and that will widen up my camera view. Let's set it to 55 millimeters, hit enter, and I'm going to move my camera. I'm holding Shift and I'm dragging left to actually move the camera left. There we go, that looks really nice. I'm going to right click and say Add Scene. Now something happens with these files. I don't know if it's going to happen with your file, but it does in this file. And that is, when I click on this now, everything disappears. I don't know if this is a bug in SketchUp or just something strange with its interaction with the Cabwriter file. But this is easily fixed if you open the Layers dialog, or in 2020 it's called Tags. And we will use this Select All function, and we will turn them all on. And then we will go down and choose the layers with a Z at the beginning. I'm going to Shift select all of those. I'm going to Control select this sync layer to unselect it. I'm going to disable those layers by turning them off. And now I'm going to right click and update. And for some reason now, when I click on the scene, it should work perfectly. Now when I come over here and set up another view, what you want to do when you're setting up your interior view is try to take as dynamic view as possible. So we're going to try to catch some foreground, some midground, and some background. Here I'm catching a little bit of this door to get a little bit of distance there, a little bit of this door. I'm going to back up a little bit because I know that eventually I'll want to put some stools in front of this bar. We're catching the sink. Maybe too much of that. There we go. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to right click on my last scene and click Add, but when I click this Scene 21, you'll see everything has disappeared again, which is awkward. I'm going to try and just go over here and turn these on. So we have them back, and then we right click and choose Update. Now you might think perhaps I have my scene styles set up incorrectly, but that's not the case. My scene styles are all set up to, and here maybe you don't have it. This little plus sign here shows the details, and if we look down, my details are set up so that my scenes should remember hidden geometry and tags and layers and all that stuff. But for some reason, it's just not remembering that until I go and do the tags. Anyway, so now it's working. We have that and that. In this case, I mean, I'm not going to use these images anymore. And be sure that you have saved your Cabwriter file as a new file, because what we have to unfortunately do is do some destructive editing to the kitchen. So when you go in to create your rendering, a lot of the things that we need to do will require that you unlock and change geometry and things like this. So you will not be able to update it easily as the kitchen design changes. You want to keep that in mind, because the way Cabwriter works, it locks a lot of geometry, and you'll have to unlock it in order to paint it. And we will also be going in, actually, let me open the other file here. Okay, so here we have the original file, and if we look at perspective view, let's try to hit page up here. Now if I were to go and try to edit the objects, you'll see that they're locked. They're red and locked. Almost all the Cabwriter objects, a lot of them anyway, appear to be locked. And I'm not sure why that is, but so when I go in there to try and edit it, I can't do anything with it. So I need to select all the Cabwriter cabinetry, and I will have to choose to unlock it. I'm just going to right click and choose unlock. Now I should be able to edit those parts and pieces. I'm going to jump back over to the previous file where I was. Now we can see that these components are unlocked, which means that when I go into edit, in this case, it will only edit those 4 slats. So I have to go in and do quite a bit of manual labor to get these up to snuff for rendering. It is possible to just simply paint the cabinetry with a wood texture and go ahead and hit render. But what we're going to talk about today is going to try to make this as photorealistic as possible. But keep in mind that a lot of the steps that I'm doing here are to do a high-end photorealistic rendering. And if you just need a quick and dirty little render of your kitchen, it is not a problem to do that in Twilight Render. If you don't care about the UV mapping or exact lighting or anything like that, and you just want to quickly get a good idea of how the lights and the materials might work in this scene, you can definitely do that with Twilight. Let me just show you an example. If I were to just take a wood veneer and just select all that stuff and just paint it, I can do that in SketchUp. Let's grab these guys, paint them. And I can edit the size of the texture. For some reason, the default size is just massive in SketchUp. It's not normal. But here it is. If we set it to 20 inches instead of 72 inches, it looks like a normal wood material. And we could go ahead and render that. For instance, I can choose a template, select that wood material, template wood, satin, or gloss, whichever makes me happy. So let's maybe try gloss. And then I can go ahead and render this. I can quickly apply a material to the marble. Maybe all the countertops want to be this color. We can apply perfect reflection to the countertop. There it is. We can apply a stainless material to the metal. If you have Twilight Render Pro, these might already be loaded for you already. Otherwise, you'll have to go to Templates, Metal, and choose one. In this case, aluminum. Here's one that's stainless steel. We could quickly paint the walls. I'm going to choose a desaturated beige color. Maybe a little less red. There we go. And right now there's no ceiling in there, but we could go in, if we really wanted a very quick test render, we could go into the settings, turn off the sun, set the sky color to be a light gray for just a general illumination coming down from the ceiling. And then we could test render. So I'll hit test render and we will, looks like I missed one here. I'm going to choose that. There we go. I'm going to stop this rendering. I realized I didn't paint the other wall yet, and I didn't paint this panel, so we'll quickly do that. Okay, so quickly reloading this rendering. Now, if you're rendering test renders, and you're more trying to figure out your camera view, but not so much caring about any of the materials or anything that you're tweaking there. Here it is. Let me show you that we're on interior preview settings so that it renders fairly quickly. I'm just trying to get a general idea for the illumination and the colors. But you can definitely see that you can do a very quick down and dirty rendering of your space without having to worry about all the lights and every little detail. But today we're going to show you just step by step quickly how we went from this type of quick rendering to a more refined photorealistic rendering. So the first thing that you're going to have to do is properly map all of your cabinetry with the textures. UV mapping is important for photorealism. For instance, if we look at this cabinet door, we can see that the texture is running vertically on the horizontal pieces, and typically it would be running the other way, unless this of course is specified. But so really painting the exterior of objects is a bad idea. I'm going to open the next view that we worked on. Okay, so here is the same space. I've applied a different countertop material, and I've started to paint the cabinetry here. I've painted the walls with the beige, and here you can see where I started to bevel the edges. So in your model, wherever there's a beveled edge, there will be a little shiny spot. Let's take a look at that in the final render. So here you can see, if you have beveled the front edge, that it gives a little bit of a nice, more photorealistic look to it. I've also beveled the edges of the walls on all the cabinetry on each edge. It gives this very nice, more realistic look rather than having a sharp edge. Here you can really see where it stands out, how the light reflects off of that corner when you've beveled the edges. So the first step is to come in and to more accurately build these models. For instance, you can see that the curve here has been really segmented. We'll basically want to rebuild that countertop so that it's more realistic and smooth. You can also see that these front cabinets are segmented, and perhaps we want to rebuild those more accurately. But at the very least, we'll want to bevel the edges. So Twilight provides a nice tool for that. If you open up one of these components, I'm going to double click on the front face. I'm going to right click and choose Twilight Render V2 Edges, Bevel Edges, and if I type in a 0.1 and hit enter a second time to accept that distance, you can see that it's now beveled that edge for us. We can do the same for this. Double click that, Twilight Render V2 edges, bevel edges, 0.1, enter, enter. And there we go. So we will need to go through and do that for each of the prominent edges that we can see in our scene. I don't need to do it on every edge in each component, just the very front edges. And you can see that. So what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll do that for each and every piece in this model. If they're locked like this, you have to unlock them in order to work with them. And then the next step is to paint each piece with the proper UV textures. So one quick way to do this, before you bevel, you should actually paint first. One quick way to do this, you will double click on the group to edit it, and then you will paint. So in this case, I'm using this wood texture here. You can hold Shift key down and paint everything. And if it's going the wrong direction, go Texture, Position, right click and say Rotate 90, and then hit Enter to accept, and you can rotate that texture. So Texture, Position, Rotate 90, hit Enter to accept. Now if I select that texture with holding down the Alt key and using the Paint Bucket tool in SketchUp, if you select that, it will copy also the UV mapping, and it will paste it on the next face over. So if I copy this and then I paste it here, it will wrap seamlessly that UV mapping. Try it on the bottom here. We will select this with Alt click and then we'll paint this to match the UV wrapping. Okay, so now I'll double click this, right click, choose Twilight V2 edges, bevel edges, 0.1, enter, enter, and it will now have beveled edges with the texture. If you bevel the edges before applying the texture, you will have to go in there and manually paint every single beveled edge, which will not be fun. So quickest workflow is to paint it first and then bevel the edges. The beveled edges, the mapping on them might not be that critical because when they change the angle in the view, the lighting changes on there, and the mapping, unless very close up like this, will not really be noticeable. But as you're further away, you can definitely see when the texture is either horizontal or vertical, and so that's critical to get on the major faces. So now if I want to use a vertical texture for this, let's select all these instances. We'll unlock them. If I want to use a vertical texture, I wouldn't sample from this. I would now sample from this one here because I know it's running vertically. And now when I double click to enter that, hold Shift key to paint all the faces. It's going to paint all the faces with that vertical texture. Now I can double click, select that, Twilight V2 edges, bevel edges, 0.1, enter, enter. And now I've quickly painted all those. So this can go rather quickly for you if you're choosing the correct UV mapped texture. So I'm going to Twilight Render. First I'm going to paint all the faces. Double click this to choose that. Edges, bevel edges, and then enter, enter. Okay. So you can see that can go rather quickly if you start getting used to this technique. I think I need to really unlock all this geometry. It wasn't already done so in this file. Okay. So be sure and just grab the horizontally mapped texture and then paint that on the horizontal objects and vertically mapped textures on the vertical mapped objects. And there we go. So I will open the next file and show you what it looks like after you've done this. So we would continue to develop this scene by going in and carefully texture mapping each face that needs to be texture mapped. We would also bevel all the edges that need to be beveled. We would need to apply this marble onto this surface, and so on and so forth, painting as we go. Another thing that we need to do is build out the rest of the house, because you're going to see through these doors. So what I built is, I went and built a hallway. Make sure you have your walls and ceilings built with thickness to avoid light leaks. Okay, so on and so forth. You've get the idea that you need to add the details you'll need. Let's open the next step. The next step that we did, we tweaked the color of the wood, and we tried to give a nicer faucet on the sink. We remodeled the fume hood to be more accurate and to be a better model. And I believe we started remodeling the refrigerator over here, because it's a very low poly model. Here we can see we tweaked the material here on the countertop, and we added the electrical light switches and plugs on the walls, because this will add greatly to the realism of the image. Just adding those alone really bumps up your realism. I also added some wall base on the wall, physically modeled that. And here you can see, actually I didn't quite finish it yet in this step, but I had begun to lay out the lines. Let's open the next scene to see what steps we took further. Here you can also see that I have placed the lighting components. Now, if you own Twilight Render Pro, there are many light components already created for you. So be sure and go into the red carpet section of the forum. Make sure to initialize your pro status on the forum, and you will be able to download these components. Here I'll show you the lighting components. Here's what the Twilight Lighting Components folder looks like. And if you go into Indoor and scroll down, you can find these indoor downlights. So if you choose the 100-watt can light, if you were to place it on the ceiling, it won't cut an opening unless you have exploded the ceiling. Make sure that you're inside the group to edit it, or you've exploded the ceiling, and then it'll cut the opening. But here you can see I've downloaded some salad bowl, some other entourage from 3D Warehouse, an espresso machine, a wood block with knives, a cookbook, and I have also placed some wine glasses and wine bottle, which are available on the Twilight Render forum as well. I have further developed the model of the refrigerator and the fume hood, and tried to bevel the edges of everything that I could. Even down below here, this wall, this edge is beveled. And let's see what else we've done. You can see there's still some more work to do on this cabinetry as far as getting it all mapped. But for this view, it would be sufficient like this. So you could already render this view, and it would come out something like, here is what the fourth stage rendering would look like. This has some light coming in down the hallway. You can see just these two lights is significant for this space. But obviously we'd want to develop it a little bit more. Already looking pretty good. I've modeled the handles for the cabinetry. We've added a wood flooring. Here is Kitchen 5. I had added these pendant lights over the island, but I ended up not using them. They didn't really match the style of the space. And with a little bit of further development of the sink and a new faucet on the sink, I moved the espresso machine and started to try to refine by building the wall base over here. Try to refine this image. Here's what it rendered out as. Okay, so you can see that it's looking pretty good, except that I don't really like the countertop material. We'll need a backsplash behind the stove, and we can tweak some more things. So let's dive into that. In the 6th step, we've added under cab lighting. We've added some more lights in the space. We've tweaked the way the sun comes through the windows. And we've added this back painted glass backsplash on the stove. Okay, so here we are. We can see this backsplash now. Let's take a look at the backsplash and the under cab lights. I'm going to double click to open this object. And what this is a simple box with the edges beveled on the front. And then the back face of the box was deleted. And what I did is I copied the front beveled edge and this front face, and I copied them over to the back. However, if you hide this, you can tell that this material here is an aquamarine color, and then the sides and the front are a clear glass. So I'm going to unhide that, and let's look at the template materials used for that. For the clear glass, we have used the template Architectural Glass Common. This gives you the reflective look of glass without the refractive distortions. And then for the back painted glass part, this part we've painted with the template Perfect Reflection High. And that helps it to act like glass while being a solid color. You can also look in the monochrome view, and we can see that all the front faces are facing outwards. Even this back painted glass is facing outwards toward the camera, not towards the back wall. So in front of the stove, here we can look at these faces are all facing towards the camera. So here, when we go into monochrome view, it's a good reminder. We need to check to make sure that the back faces are correctly oriented. And here we can see the stove's back faces are all wrong. And this is typical of downloading models from the 3D warehouse. And here we can see that the handle's back faces are all wrong. So we need to go in and flip those. You will go into the faces, right click and choose reverse faces. And then you'll have to repaint them in the correct UV mapping and correct texture. Looking at the under cab lighting, how was this done? So underneath the fume hood, you can see this yellow square, yellow rectangle, and underneath the cabinets you can see these yellow rectangles. Each of those is painted with a color and renamed Emit Under Cab, and then each of them is applied template emitter low voltage, just like that. And I have placed a rectangle here, and each of these rectangles is held off of the surface of the cabinetry. It's held 1 inch away from the wall, and then slightly below the, I think it's about 1/8 of an inch below, yeah, 1/8 of an inch below the surface of the cabinetry, so that they don't Z-fight or interfere with one another in 3D space. It's also the same way this is handled here, and that is placed to give that nice light coming down the wall, washing the wall. If you prefer that it be towards the front, you can easily do that. Just place them more towards the front, towards the skirt on the front of the cabinetry. Also could look great, but it won't have that wall washing effect like I'm showing here, which I really enjoy in this image. It really makes it pop. And one more thing, let's look at the lighting that we have here. We've got 3 small can lights over the top of the island, and I also have these 4 lights. So if we go into wireframe and choose plan view, turn off perspective, we can see how these lights are laid out in this scene. I have 2 lights in the back hallway, 2 lights over the kitchen floor, and 2 lights over the main floor over here, and then these 3 small lights over the top of the island. That's it. You can also look at the environment settings for that rendering. It was just a sky color of brightness set to 1 and the background color set to like this gray color. No sun enabled. And here you can see gives a nice overall lighting. All right, let's look at the next step. In the next step, what I did was refine the model for this wood knife block. I added these apples and put materials on them. I found and created a better marble texture for the countertops. I added a few more cups and plates onto the counter and gave a nice material for the floor and the wall base. And we'll talk about some of these materials that we've applied, the templates that we've applied to the electrical outlets, the ceiling, the wall paint, the floor. I also downloaded these stools and I refined them. I put fixed any texture mapping, added bevels to the edges that are prominent, and so forth. So I've also created a camera 2. So let's look at camera 1 again. And we can see some of these. Let's take a look at some of these materials. I used a custom paint. I used a very low IOR on the ceiling. So 1.05 and shininess of 50. This is in order to get just a very nice sheen to that to look more realistic. So you could go paint flat and that would get you close. You could try paint flat enamel, get you even closer to what I was using there. So you can choose either one of those or make your own like I did. I had shininess, I believe 50 and IOR of 1.05. But this is how you control the shininess with both of these numbers. The more you increase the IOR, the shinier kind of sheen it's going to have. So keeping this low but above 1, an IOR of 1 would be equivalent to air. That is that it has no refraction. So 1.05 is a nice, very subtle refraction. For the shiny plastic on these outlets, I used a material I called plastic white. Make sure that when you make anything white in SketchUp, do not use pure white colors, but this is actually 89 in the blackness part of the HSB, so it's not even above 90. But it does render as white, so keep that in mind. Anything that's pure white in SketchUp will be far too bright when you're rendering, because nothing in real life is white. So here we used template, plastic, shiny. That's it. Let's look at the black metal on the faucet. We used templates, metal, and I set the IOR to 1.1 and the shininess to 8. So template, metal, doesn't really matter. Go steel. Change the IOR to 1.1, shininess to 8, and it gives that nice sheen off of that dark metal. For our cabinetry, we used the template Advanced Reflection, and then we tweaked it. So we put 1.4, 140 here with a reflection color near white, but not pure white. So you would go Template, Advanced Reflection, Wood Mapped, and then we increased this shininess to, I think, was 80. For the countertop, I went into the Deep Editor. I started out with a Advanced Reflection Perfect, I think. And I set the reflection color to be 2 colors, added layers. So I chose you right click on reflection, you chose layers, addition, and then set each of these to 50% weight. And I used a solid color and the image. So I used white, and the image was the SketchUp model, the SketchUp texture. This is how I set it up, but if you need a quick marble, you can easily just simply grab the template, choose this, and say template, perfect reflection high, or actually perfect reflection low. Could look really good here. You could try polished concrete, looks fantastic. Or you can try the advanced reflection polished concrete. Feel free to experiment. All of them will look great. You don't need to go into the Deep Editor and start getting lost. You can just simply grab any of those templates. They'll work fantastic. For the flooring, we used Advanced Reflection Wood Mapped. And that's just by default, Advanced Reflection Wood Mapped Reflection. For the refrigerator and for the other appliances, I went in and I painted each surface with a good scratch texture, and then we applied templates, metal, tin. Make sure the IOR is low and the shininess is not too strong. This is the same texture on all of them so that they will match throughout the scene. For the apples, I used templates, advanced reflection, and then I set the shininess to 100 here. For the plate, I used template, tile, gloss. For the ceramic, and for the ceramic cups, templates, advanced reflection, gloss tile. You can choose either one of those. Looks great on ceramic. For the wood bowl, I used template, wood, gloss. For the wine glasses, I used template, glass, flint. Make sure that if you model your wine glasses, they are very well modeled. These are pretty high poly models, and they're very thin glass. Be sure to model your wine glasses accurately. For the wine bottle, I believe it's perfect reflection. Painted it this dark wine color, and then I just used templates, perfect reflection high. The wall I left as the default flat color, and for the pages on the book, I left also as default flat, but you could also make them glossy. Template, paint, gloss. Might have been nice for them. Let's open the next stage file and we'll show you the final rendering for camera 2. Okay, so here we are in the final stage, and this is camera 2. Here's a look at the rendered image. Here you can see that the marble texture is really nice, looking good. The corner of this cabinet was remodeled to be nice and smooth circle. All these beveled edges are throwing nice light off the corners. You can see how they really help make the design pop. You can see that the handles were added to the cabinetry. The cabinetry was all texture mapped properly. And we added in some background information just to sort of fill out this scene. So we added the carpet, we added the chairs, a little end table, book, some paintings, the painting lighting, we lit the living room. And here you can see how the back hallway lighting is important. And even this back hallway has a light inside of it. You can see that we have lifted the geometry off of adjacent geometry so that it throws a shadow. So it's not good enough to just have a line between two pieces of cabinetry, but to actually leave a little bit of a gap for a shadow line. You can see this on the cups, underneath the cups on the countertop. This is exactly how they would look in real life, and actually they're lifted off the countertop, 1/8 of an inch. Lifted this up off the countertop a little bit. All these little details matter if you want to go to photorealistic. Here you can see that we've spent some time to model the wall base with an actual little toe sticking out, actual thickness, give it a proper material. We even modeled the wall base on the opposite side, and how that just gives it that finished look. Here's more wall base in the living room. Beveled edges on these edges of the wall, beveled edges around the doorway. You can take a look how all of these details matter. And when you employ all these little tricks, the rendering quality just goes up. So proper model and proper texturing, proper lighting, all of these things add up together to make a great rendering. Here we can see we added 4 ceiling lights up in there. Let's take a look at the environment. Again, background color, no sun. But when you do render, what you want to make sure is that you've set the post-processing. In this case, the post-processing had linear tone mapping, dark 2.3, light 1, and then was taken into Photoshop and even edited a little bit more. So let's take a look at, here's one without any post-processing. And this was actually a practice because the lights weren't on. You can see the lights weren't on here. The lights weren't on in the hallway. Just feeling kind of dark and gloomy. And you turn those lights on, everything brightens up. So feel free to take your image into a photo editor to tweak it to brighten it even more, or give it a little more pop, give it a little more sharpness, whatever you need. But I highly suggest, if you have an NVIDIA graphics card, to get the Fast Forward plugin for Twilight. The Fast Forward plugin will denoise your image. So all of these images that you're seeing were rendered with Easy 09 render setting for final rendering. And they do take a while to clear up the noise. When you use the denoise Fast Forward plugin with your NVIDIA CUDA graphics card, it really cuts the render times down and gives you great results. So hopefully you'll be able to use Twilight Render in combination with Cabwriter to really wow your clients with their new kitchen. If you have any questions, we are always available on the forums. It's extremely friendly and helpful in our community, so please come and join us there. This has been Fletch for Twilight Render. We'll see you on the forums.